They say success is the best revenge. Tonight, as I watch my family's desperate faces through the grimy window of a roadside diner, I finally understand what that means. My name is Sophia Chen, and this is the story of how I transformed from a doormat into the woman who holds my family's fate in her hands. It's a story that begins in the suffocating confines of a crumbling duplex in Riverside, California, and ends with me standing in a corner office overlooking Silicon Valley, watching the people who tried to crush my dreams beg for scraps. Growing up in the Chen household meant walking on eggshells around my father's explosive temper and my sister's relentless jealousy. Dad had been a factory supervisor until the plant closed in 2019, leaving him a bitter man who drowned his failures in cheap beer. My older sister Jessica resented my academic success. Where she struggled with basic algebra, I solved calculus problems for fun. Where she barely graduated high school, I was accepted to UC San Diego with a full scholarship in bioengineering. She would accidentally delete my homework files or hide my textbooks before exams, but I was young and desperately craved their approval, so I endured. I worked part-time jobs throughout high school, turning over most earnings to help with bills. I downplayed my successes, hoping that if I sacrificed enough, they would finally see my worth. College was my escape attempt, but family dysfunction followed. Dad would call during finals, drunk and demanding money. Jessica appeared with sob stories needing cash for rent or her latest failed scheme. I gave and gave. I took additional student loans to support them. I worked campus labs until 2 a.m., then helped Jessica with community college assignments she'd inevitably failed to submit. By senior year, I was exhausted. My grades slipped not from incapacity, but from spreading myself too thin. My thesis advisor, Dr. Maya Patel, a brilliant immigrant from Mumbai, noticed the change. Sophia, she told me one evening as I sat in her office, dark circles under my eyes and stress eating my third cup of coffee that day. You're one of the most promising students I've ever worked with. But you're destroying yourself. What's going on? I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain that my family saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a resource to exploit? How could I admit that the very people who should have been my biggest supporters were actively sabotaging my future? Instead, I mumbled something about being tired and left her office, promising to get more rest. But rest was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when Dad was calling 3 times a week asking for money. Not when Jessica had moved back home and was pressuring me to drop out and get a real job to help support her and her unemployed boyfriend. The breaking point came during final week of senior year. I'd been working on my thesis for months, groundbreaking research on bioprinted neural scaffolds for spinal cord injuries. My presentation was Friday, and this could secure graduate school or a high-paying industry job. Thursday night, while perfecting my presentation, Jessica called hysterically. "Sophia, come home now," she sobbed. "Dad's having another episode. He's talking about killing himself." Despite everything, I loved my family. I drove 3 hours to Riverside, arriving to find Dad passed out on the couch, surrounded by beer cans, very much alive. Jessica met me sheepishly. "Oh, he's fine now, but since you're here, can you help me with something?" That something was cosigning a car loan. She'd manipulated me into missing crucial preparation time for the most important presentation of my academic career. I stared at her in disbelief. "You made me think Dad was suicidal so I would come here and sign loan papers?" She shrugged, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "You never would have come otherwise. Besides, it's not like you're doing anything important at school. It's just some science project." Just some science project. 4 years of my life, tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, countless sleepless nights, and she dismissed it all as just some science project. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came when Dad woke up and saw me there. Instead of gratitude or concern for my well-being after driving all night, he saw an opportunity. "Good, you're here," he said, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "I need $2,000 for the mortgage. They're threatening foreclosure." I explained that I had no money to give him, that I was surviving on ramen noodles and student loans. His response was to explode into one of his trademark rages, calling me selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment. He accused me of thinking I was better than my family, of abandoning them for my fancy education. "You think you're so smart," he spat, his face red with anger. "But you're just a parasite, a leech. You've been sucking this family dry for years with your college expenses, and now you won't even help when we need you." The irony was breathtaking. I, who had been supporting them financially and emotionally for years, was the parasite, not Jessica, who hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. Not Dad, who spent more on alcohol each month than I did on groceries. Me. I drove back to San Diego in a daze, arriving on campus just hours before my presentation. I looked terrible, felt worse, and my preparation was nowhere near where it should have been. But I had to try. The presentation was a disaster. I stumbled through my slides, lost my train of thought multiple times, and couldn't answer basic questions from the panel. It was humiliating. Years of hard work undermined because I had once again chosen my family's manufactured crisis over my own future. Afterward, Dr. Patel found me sitting alone in the hallway, head in my hands. "That wasn't you up there," she said quietly, sitting beside me. "Where were you?" And finally, the dam broke. I told her everything. About the constant demands for money, the emotional manipulation, the way my family treated my education as both a burden and a cash cow. I told her about Jessica's fake emergency, about Dad's rage, about how I felt trapped between loyalty and self-preservation. Dr. Patel listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Sophia," she finally said, "there's a difference between supporting your family and being consumed by them. What you've described isn't love, it's exploitation." She told me about her own experience coming to America, about the family members who had tried to guilt her into sending money she didn't have, about the difficult decision to set boundaries. "You can't save people who don't want to be saved," she said, "and you can't sacrifice your future for people who don't value your present." Her words hit me like a physical blow. For the first time, I saw my situation clearly. I wasn't being a good daughter or sister. I was being an enabler, allowing my family to use me as a crutch instead of taking responsibility for their own lives. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I turned off my phone and spent the weekend thinking, really thinking, about what I wanted my life to look like. I realized that I had been so focused on gaining my family's approval that I had forgotten to approve of myself. Monday morning, I walked into Dr. Patel's office with a new sense of purpose. "I want to apply for graduate school," I told her, "and I want to do it right." She smiled. "Now that sounds like the Sophia I know." The next few months were transformative. With Dr. Patel's guidance, I applied to PhD programs at top universities. I stopped taking my family's calls during study hours. I stopped sending money home except for genuine emergencies, and I started requiring proof before I helped. The pushback was immediate and intense. Dad called me selfish and threatened to disown me. Jessica spread rumors to our extended family that I had become too good for them, but for the first time in my life, I held firm. My hard work paid off. I was accepted into Stanford's bioengineering PhD program with a full fellowship and a generous stipend. It was a dream come true, and I was finally ready to embrace it without guilt. The night before I left for Stanford, Jessica called one last time. "I can't believe you're really going to abandon us," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm finally choosing myself." Graduate school was everything I hoped. Surrounded by brilliant minds and cutting-edge research, I thrived. My neural tissue engineering work attracted biotech companies. By third year, I had 3 published papers and a patent application. I discovered that without constant family drama, I had energy for relationships. I made friends, started dating Alex, a supportive computer science PhD. For the first time, I was genuinely happy. Family calls became less frequent as I maintained boundaries. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, but no longer served as their ATM or emotional dumping ground. In my 4th year, everything changed again. A startup called Neurotech Solutions, backed by some of Silicon Valley's most prominent investors, offered to license my patent for a sum that made my head spin. But more than that, they offered me something I had always dreamed of, the position of Chief Scientific Officer, with the authority to build my own research team and bring my innovations to market. I was 26 years old, about to become a millionaire, and finally in control of my own destiny. The irony wasn't lost on me when Jessica called a week after the news broke. She had seen the TechCrunch article about Neurotech's latest acquisition and the brilliant young scientist behind their breakthrough technology. "Sophia," she said, and for the first time in years, her voice was humble. "I saw the article. I'm proud of you." I waited for the ask. It came quickly. "Look, I know things have been tense between us, but we're family. Dad's health isn't good, and the medical bills are piling up. Mom's working 2 jobs just to keep the house. I was hoping maybe you could help?" For a moment, I felt the old familiar tug of guilt. These were the people who had raised me, who had sacrificed for me in their own flawed way. Shouldn't I help them now that I could afford it? But then I remembered all the years of manipulation, all the times they had undermined my dreams and dismissed my achievements. I thought about Jessica calling my life's work just some science project. I thought about Dad calling me a parasite while I worked myself to exhaustion to support them. "I'll tell you what, Jessica," I said calmly. "I'm willing to have a conversation about this, but not over the phone. If you and Dad want my help, you can come to me." 3 weeks later, they sat across from me in an upscale restaurant in Palo Alto, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the tech executives and venture capitalists. Dad had aged considerably, his face gaunt and yellow from liver problems, brought on by years of heavy drinking. Jessica looked tired and defeated, her dreams of easy money and celebrity lifestyle long since abandoned. They had driven 8 hours to get there, probably the longest either of them had ever been away from Riverside. I watched them squirm as they realized this was my world now, that I wasn't the desperate, people-pleasing girl they had manipulated for so many years. "Thank you for coming," I said, keeping my voice pleasant but professional. "I wanted to see you both because I have something important to say." Dad leaned forward eagerly, probably expecting me to pull out a checkbook. Instead, I pulled out a folder of documents. "These are financial planning resources," I explained. "Contact information for social workers who specialize in helping families navigate medical debt. Applications for state assistance programs. Information about debt consolidation and bankruptcy protection." Jessica's face fell. "We don't need handouts, Sophia. We need family. You need to take responsibility for your own lives," I replied calmly. "For years you used me as a safety net, which prevented you from learning to catch yourselves. I enabled that, and I'm sorry." Dad's face was turning red, the old anger rising. "After everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me?" I interrupted, my voice still level but with steel underneath. "You discouraged my education. You undermined my confidence. You treated my success as your personal ATM. You called me a parasite for pursuing my dreams." I pulled out another document, a detailed accounting of every dollar I had sent home over the past 8 years. Every opportunity I had missed because of manufactured family crises. Every night of sleep I had lost worrying about your problems. "This is what I did for you," I said, sliding the paper across the table. $87,000 in direct financial support, countless hours of unpaid emotional labor, sacrificed opportunities that cost me far more than money. Dad stared at the numbers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Jessica looked stunned. "I'm not giving you money," I continued. "But I am giving you something more valuable, the opportunity to succeed on your own terms. Dad, you're 52 years old. That's not too old to retrain for a new career, especially with the resources I've provided. Jessica, you're intelligent and capable when you apply yourself. You can build a life you're proud of, but only if you stop waiting for someone else to build it for you." I stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table to cover their meal and gas money home. "I love you both," I said, and meant it. "But I won't be your safety net anymore. I won't be your scapegoat or your ATM. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be as equals, not as predator and prey." As I walked away, I heard Jessica calling my name, but I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I had said everything I needed to say without apologizing, without hedging, without trying to soften the blow. That was 2 years ago. Dad did enter a retraining program and now works as a maintenance supervisor at a solar installation company. The steady work and health insurance have been good for him, and he's been sober for 18 months. Jessica finished her associate's degree and works as a medical assistant at a clinic in Riverside. They've never become the warm, supportive family I once dreamed of, but they've stopped trying to exploit me, which is its own kind of progress. We talk occasionally now, carefully and with boundaries. They ask about my work with genuine interest, rather than calculating how much money I must be making. I send graduation gifts for Jessica's children, and get well cards when Dad has medical appointments. It's not the relationship I wanted, but it's the relationship that's healthy and sustainable. As for me, neurotech went public last year, making me wealthier than I ever imagined possible. More importantly, our neural scaffold technology completed its first successful human trials last month. The patient, a 3-4-year-old construction worker who had been paralyzed from the waist down, regained feeling in his legs for the first time in 3 years. I still think about that presentation I bombed in college, how different my life might have been if I had succeeded then. But I've come to realize that failure was exactly what I needed. It forced me to confront the toxic dynamics that were holding me back. It taught me that I could survive disappointment and come back stronger. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being so harsh with my family, if I wish I had just given them the money they wanted. The answer is complicated. I regret that they felt entitled to exploit me, but I don't regret refusing to enable it. I wish our relationship could have been built on mutual respect from the beginning, but I'm grateful for the strength I found in demanding it later. The girl who drove through the night to cosign a car loan for someone who manipulated her with fake suicide threats is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her worth, who sets boundaries, who chooses love without choosing exploitation. They called me a parasite once, said I would never amount to anything without them. Tonight, as I sit in my home office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, reading emails from scientists around the world who want to collaborate on advancing our technology, I smile at the irony. I did become successful, but not despite my family's lack of support. I became successful because I finally learned the difference between supporting people and being consumed by them. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's self-destruction. My legacy isn't the money I've made or the patents I've filed. It's the precedent I set for myself, that I am worth more than what I can give to others, that my dreams matter, that I deserve relationships based on mutual respect, not emotional extortion. The leech metaphor was more accurate than my father knew, but he had the roles reversed. I wasn't the parasite draining the family dry. I was the host who finally learned to remove the parasites that had been feeding off my potential for years. Some stories end with grand reconciliations and tearful apologies. This isn't one of those stories. But it's a true story, and it's my story. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.